Wednesday afternoon, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams. This is Dog Nation's recruiting insider Jeff Sindell. Welcome into another edition of Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. An hour's worth of recruiting talk. We'll check in on some of the top targets from 2020. We'll hear from a couple of those guys on today's program as well, including five-star running back Kendall Milton. Probably not fair to say we'll hear from Tate Ratledge, but we'll certainly hear about him later on when Mike Johnson joins us for Real Talk. Mike's a former SEC All-American. And let me tell you something, Jeff, both publicly in the video you'll see and privately in some one-on-one conversations, Johnson has raved about Ratledge with me as of late. I'm looking forward to sharing some of that with our audience here today as well.
Yeah, Tate's one of those guys to me that really changed his body a lot and really changed his game up from junior year to pre-senior year. I think he's 6'7", almost 320 now, and he scored over 100 at the opening, Brandon. And for an offensive lineman, or a defensive lineman to that matter, over 300 pounds, to get over 100 points on that old-timey spark rating, that's moving.
Yeah, so we'll hear about him and as part of our Real Talk a little bit later on. Before we get to that, you and I were both lucky enough to be in Hoover, Alabama yesterday for SEC Media Days. Kirby Smart had a lot to say, and the subject of recruiting did come up. And at least one aspect, it's a familiar topic. He was asked, as you would probably expect, given the way that it's been chatted about thus far this offseason, the future of UGA-Florida in Jacksonville. And Kirby once again pivoted back to the idea of recruiting and what he thinks that Georgia possibly loses out on by not having this game on the Athens campus every other year. Here is a taste of what Kirby Smart had to say.
Yeah, I think anytime you look at things from a self-analysis and you say, okay, let's do quality control. How can we get better? How can we grow? How do we improve? All the things that we were talking about earlier, where we go. How do we improve at recruiting? Getting opportunities to put your best foot forward to have people into your home. So you build a $63 million facility at your home location and you want to develop relationships with kids. Every opportunity you miss to have a kid at your home is an opportunity to get better. We don't look at things from a scope of, well, we had the number 3 or number 2 or number 6 or number 10 recruiting class. That doesn't matter. We're trying to figure out how to get better. And the best way to get better is to have opportunities to present in front of those kids.
So when I had a chance to speak to Georgia Athletic Director Greg McGarity a couple of weeks ago, McGarity said, yes, we should take those kinds of words from Smart to mean that he does want to move this game from Jacksonville, Florida, and essentially that's his argument for why it should happen. Jeff, I ask you, as someone who not only covers Georgia now, but has attended these games and certainly well aware of this tradition, is that a winning argument from Smart for why history should be done away with?
Well, I think here's the main thing. I think, it's going to be bucking tradition, of course, for a lot of Georgia fans out there and Florida fans as well. Both of them, actually. But with what's going on there, I'm the recruiting guy, and I can't remember one single time where there was a player Georgia wanted, but they just didn't have a big enough game to lure that kid in there. And if you're talking about getting him in on their junior year or sophomore year, and you want to kind of make them fall in love with the program, I get it. But Smart's words, and we say that they're restated, but for me, this is a fresh platform statement for him about how Georgia feels. It's like, we just built this new game room. I want you to come see the big TV. This is an opportunity to market Georgia and sell Georgia another opportunity to have a home game. I think maybe that's what more than it is, because I'll restate. I don't think Georgia's lost a single player because they didn't have a game. And, kind of use one reference, Game of Thrones is reference, where everybody talked about breaking the wheel. Well, right now, Georgia football is the wheel, and they don't need a big-name opponent to bring a recruit in to make them love the program.
So based on what Kirby Smart says right there, and I will make this very clear, as someone who certainly comes from this perspective of a fan, the cocktail party is something I really enjoy. I hope that someone, somewhere, sometime, makes the argument for why the game should remain in Jacksonville, because that would be my preference, but I'm going to listen closely to what Kirby Smart says, and I'm going to be frankly, fairly easily swayed by what Kirby Smart might want. And you say, well, listen, I can't think of a single recruit that Georgia has lost because it hasn't had an opportunity to host that player on the same weekend the Georgia-Florida game occurs. Well, Kirby Smart, I think, would say in response to that, based on what he says here, is that you almost don't know what Georgia misses out on in the future because it doesn't have this game. Maybe Kirby Smart foresees a landscape in the future where it's hard to get guys to take visits to your school if you don't have the big game on your campus. Coming up in the very near future, Georgia going to play a long stretch of road games in non-conference because of the arrangement it's made with the Texas, the Clemsons, the Oklahomas, programs like that. Maybe Kirby Smart's a little bit concerned about having the high-profile home game. I know you know this based on the recruiting work that you've done talking to the 2020 prospects. The Notre Dame game on late September, that's the one that everybody has circled in terms of the game they want to visit. What if there's a year coming up where Georgia doesn't have a game that's quite on that same marquee level? Do you miss out on a chance to host a recruit because Alabama is playing a big game, or LSU is playing a big game, or Clemson's playing a big game?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to think about there. First of all, Kirby Smart said something about whether you have the number 6 or the number 8 or the number 10. That's not the way Georgia recruits, brother. I mean, they're talking 1, 2, or 3 right there for Georgia. And to answer your question directly, I think Georgia did have that situation. It was last year. They didn't have a marquee home game. Those were Tennessee and Auburn. And guess what? All the big boys came to Tennessee and they came to Auburn, and Georgia still ended up with the number 2 recruiting class in the country. Here's what I see, Brandon. When this happens, I think it's a lot of moving pieces. It's Kirby Smart in Georgia trying to fix the non-conference schedule. It's them trying to get a better, deeper, getting rid of the Appalachian states, the Murray states, the Arkansas states, and having big-time opponents coming in. But I think the Georgia side, which Kirby Smart states very clearly here, is simply this. What happens if Alabama's playing LSU that week and Georgia is playing a UTC Chattanooga or something like that? The big-time recruits in the country will go to LSU, Alabama, whereas Georgia, Florida, and get this, there will be some novelty to it immediately for the first 3 or 4 cycles when kids can go, especially those Florida kids that they want to keep bringing in. Oh, Georgia, Florida, and it's going to be in Athens this time? I think that's going to be a short-term winner at the expense of a long-standing, prideful Georgia tradition.
It's also, I guess, worth pointing out that LaMichael Pirine, the Florida running back, when he spoke at SEC Media Days on Monday, thought that Georgia, Florida, and Jacksonville had at least a unique aspect to it in the fact that it takes place in an NFL stadium, which is where all these players hope to be playing in Sundays in the years to come. That he felt like for him, being in the stadium that's hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars is also a bit of a preview of what his NFL future might be like, which is at least an interesting thought to consider. Amos Williams in our Facebook comments section, though, says, "Oh, BA, all you're thinking about is partying in Jacksonville. There's no way this should not be a home and home." Jeff Sintel be the first to tell you that the partying gene out of me has probably long since evaporated out of my body, but I understand where you're coming from on that. Let me wrap up, though, this portion of the conversation with what I think is the most important question. Whether you think Kirby Smart's reasoning for doing this is correct or not, here's what it comes down to. For longtime Georgia fans who like the tradition of the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, are you willing to do without that? Are you willing to do away with that simply because Kirby Smart wants to? Is Kirby Smart powerful enough within this university community, or is he persuasive enough within the hearts and minds of Georgia fans that Georgia fans would say, I've loved this tradition since I was a child, and yet now I'm willing to do away with it simply because Kirby wants it that way? How do you think Georgia fans would respond when faced with that question? Because in a roundabout way, that is the question they're being faced with.
Well, first of all, this fella right here, Thurston Mellon Adams III, he doesn't party in Jacksonville. He parties in St. Simons, Jekyll Island, Amelia Island. He's on a skipper in a yacht. He's got his captain's hat on.
That's true.
But really, I always thought this argument, Brandon, was an easy argument. When you just label it recruiting and, it'll help recruiting, it seems like everyone in the world just goes nodding their head like they'll understand. Really what it is it's the way you think, Brandon. Georgia sees this as an opportunity to get even more recruits in, to host even more recruits, to add to their 329 composite score on the 24/7 team rating. I know the staff doesn't look at those things, but it's an example of Georgia to hoard more, to get more, to do more on the recruiting trail, and I think that's what that is, and it's simply, to me, a popularity contest. If Georgia's ultra-successful head coach wants the game out of Jacksonville and it moves to Jacksonville, I think eventually that will happen.
Eventually is the key word there, because I think if you put it on a ballot right now, I don't believe Kirby has achieved enough to get 51% of that vote. But eventually, Let's see what happens at the end of the season. Let's see what occurs over the next couple of years. I think eventually this is a tide that seems to be turning in the direction of the game being home and home. But if you had the vote today, and if it was a binding referendum, I think the cocktail party by a narrow margin still wins.
Well, here's what I think. And I think it's kind of like you look at it and you go, okay, and we got phones beeping around the world here right now, but you look at it and you go, you said something earlier, it's a mid-season bowl game. It's like the chance to play in an NFL stadium. I think that sort of matters for recruiting in a different lane, how current players like the fact that they've got a mid-year game where it's a trip, it's neutral sites, and it's a huge event. Now, I've listened for years of guys up and down. Isaac Nada, one of those is fresh in my memory. When you cross that bridge and you cross the St. James River and you come down and you see all those people tailgating, and it makes you feel like this is a huge football game, one of the brightest football memories of their college lives. And I think that's also important. And I think the one thing we don't hear enough about in this dialogue, because what it is right now is it's a dialogue, does it have to go immediately home and home? Can it not go 1 year Jacksonville, 1 year home, where everybody plays at least 1 year in their home stadium?
Greg McGarity said something interesting about that when I talked to him about this. He said that, and I never really considered this, he's the athletic director, he's more involved in logistics, that if the game, once it moves home and home, is ever anywhere else again after that, being in Atlanta, which some people have suggested, going back to Jacksonville as a part of a 3-city rotation, as some people suggested, that would be the choice of the team that occupies the home game. So let's say if you wanted it to be sometimes in Athens, sometimes in Gainesville, sometimes in Jacksonville, that would either have to be Georgia's choice to do without its home game for a particular time, or hope that Florida would do the same thing, that there is no 3-city rotation once you move to a home and home.
Yeah, that's not happening. Nobody's going to give up that home game. Yeah. Let's be real, folks.
And that's what McGarity said, is once it moves, it's probably gone for good. Interesting stuff, and you obviously weigh in the comment section. We'll continue to take those throughout the program here today on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. By the way, speaking of Kroger, now through July 23rd, you can earn 2 extra fuel points for every $1 you spend on Simple Truth and Private Selection items with a digital coupon. Save at your local Kroger, and it's great to have them as part of the program. Now, with all that said, let's turn our attention back to the top 2020 targets for Georgia on the board here. We do this every week on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. Let's take a look at how Jeff Sintel has ranked those targets in terms of need for Georgia, relationship with the program right now, and likelihood of maybe signing on the line that's dotted come December or February. The name number 1 on the list has been unchanged for a while. It has been the 5-star cornerback Keely Ringo out of the state of Arizona. Does that remain true here today? Well, here's what the board looks like. Do we still see Ringo on that list? My guess is we probably will. And we do. Out of Scottsdale, Arizona, Keely Ringo on June 27th. He put out his list of finalists. I'm talking about final finalists. Georgia was one of those. And I guess, Jeff, the question's worth asking. Where do you see this going from here?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I think Ringo is going to be at Georgia for next week's visit, where the dead period is going to open for about a week. There's a cool little handy calendar on that. Keely Ringo, it seems to me, from what the tea leaves and the inner grapevine that I hear tells me, is that he might make his eventual decision at an All-American game.
Okay, so that's that on that. It sounds like next weekend is setting up to be one of those pivotal dates on the 2020 calendar, and certainly one of the more important recruiting weekends of the summer, it would seem.
Yeah, we got
final time for some of these guys before high school seasons begin.
Yeah, until they have that ultra popular Georgia-Florida home game in whatever venue that is. But it was the West End Zone reveal last year. I think it's like the Great Hoorah. I don't know if there's a name for it yet.
The Great Hoorah would be an interesting name.
That would be a great name, because that's,
you get T-shirts printed that say that.
If this was Virginia, maybe that would be a little with the Wahoos and everything else. But Dog Nation, readers, viewers, family, community, you guys got a name for next weekend besides the 5-star roundup, which is what I'm sure you would prefer. Sign them all, sort them out later. We'd love to hear it.
Speaking of the 5-star roundup, Keely Ringo, a 5-star at the number 1 position, the number 2 position. My expectation is that's a 5-star as well. It has been the 5-star running back Kendall Milton, and it remains that way, with Milton ahead of a big decision coming up at the end of this month. Jeff, we're going to hear from Kendall Milton in his own words a little later on in the show, part 2 of the interview that you did with him. Either a preview of that or kind of a thought floating around your head regarding Milton right now. Where do you think things stand, and is there anything new we don't already know about what might be going on with Kendall Milton?
July 29th, that's the decision finish line for Kendall Milton. He's told us that He doesn't plan to take any more visits after that. Reminder, folks, he will enroll early at one of those 4 schools. And I think it's going to be a big day on July 29th. There's already a ceremony coming together, I've been told. And if we could ever, show more production value on our top targets, gotta get guys list, I would put an up arrow next to Kendall Milton, because that 4.60 he clocked at 2:29 at the opening finals out in Texas, to me, gooses him ever closer to Keely Ringo on that top targets list.
That's very interesting. Name number 3 on that list. Now, at one point in time, obviously, longtime viewers will know Kendall Milton was the top target, was briefly moved down, I guess, to number 2, and now it sounds like Jeff is reconsidering that there. Name number 3 on that list, top targets for the class of 2020. Do we go in-state for one of those names? That's what we kind of have been as of late, and we do. The 5-star athlete, Rick Gilbert, out of Marietta, Georgia. I thought it was interesting to hear Jeremy Pruitt talk about yesterday, taking these offensive guys and how they've kind of moved around in his program there at Tennessee. I've jokingly said on this program, I wonder if Rick Gilbert's paid attention to some of that kind of stuff. Apparently, as you've reported, Tennessee's recruiting him as a wide receiver right now. There have been a lot of people recruited as Tennessee as a wide receiver. They haven't necessarily played that spot once they got there on campus. But with that said, what is the latest on Gilbert right now?
So Gilbert's going to see some games of the season. He told us at the opening, a very revealing where he opened up at the opening media session. Needs to see about 3 or 4 games in September. Would like to make his decision at his All-American Bowl jersey ceremony at the high school in September. Doesn't want to see any stick routes. I'm going to tell you this. If Jeremy Pruitt pulled off the recruiting gully washer of a lifetime and was able to sign Gilbert, and then he brought up the talk early on about moving to the defensive side of the ball, I think Eric Gilbert would make a Keely Ringo 4.35 laser 40 to the transfer portal, because that's what it should be for. That young man, for the longest time, no matter who tells him, if LeBron James told Eric Gilbert, if Tony Gonzalez told Eric Gilbert, you should be a defensive end, he'd be like, I'm good, I'm going to catch passes.
Yeah, there you go. And certainly he's been doing that a lot this summer. Name number 4 on our top targets list for the class of 2020 after Rick Gilbert, who shows up after that. Well, let's take a look and see. Ooh, how about this? This is, I think, another movement in the upward direction for Noah Sewell, the linebacker out of Utah. An impressive guy, big guy, ran well, showed out at the opening. This is a pretty big leap for him as he comes in over a lot of prospects who are rated higher than him on the traditional recruiting boards. But apparently you're liking what you're seeing from Sewell right now.
Sewell is a 5-star walking in my mind. I don't know if there's 10 players in the country in this class that I like better for college football, as well as an immediate impact in the SEC because of the way he moves. He can play inside linebacker, he can play outside linebacker. And my friend, if we talked about up arrows a little bit while back about Kendall Milton having an up arrow, I think Noah Sewell has 2 up arrows next to him right now. He, to me, is the hottest player in the country. And when they re-rank all those boards and everybody processes and marginalizes and all the algorithms spit out new ratings for these guys, you're going to see Noah Sewell, I feel, as a 5-star.
Well, Tram Dog on YouTube's already noticing this, saying big leap Jeff. He's obviously noticing the leap that Sewell took there, and we'll see how that continues to evolve coming up in the days ahead. How about name number 5, top targets for the class of 2020 coming in after Noah Sewell on this list? Let's take a look and see if it's another defensive name, and it is the 5-star out of Columbia, South Carolina, Jordan Birch. I guess for many people, this is considered to be a 3-way battle between the 2 in-state programs. From the upstate Clemson, his hometown school, South Carolina, Georgia kind of in the mix there too. Is this a winnable recruiting battle for Georgia, and where do things stand right now?
Okay, with Jordan Birch, I think this is going to go a long way. I don't think this young man is anywhere close to making his decision, and he's absolutely, positively likely not to do any more media at all regarding his decision. He's very close to the vest with all of his information. He's very close to the vest with his family. But I want to share one thing that will make folks, maybe even my guy here, Brandon, a little bit worried. I don't know how many people know this, but Jordan Birch goes to the Hammond School. That's in Columbia, South Carolina. Already a backyard advantage for the Gamecocks. His teammate Alex Huntley is already committed to play defensive line for the Gamecocks as well. I'm going to go one further for you out there, brother. Will Muschamp's son is the quarterback for the Hammond School. You know what that means with the grateful and kind rules of the NCAA? He can go visit Hammond anytime he wants. any Friday night, any practice, any two-a-day, any fall camp. You know why? Because his son's on that team.
Brian Fortner, though, in our Facebook comment section says that he still feels like that Clemson's the chief competition for Georgia, and he even predicts he'll likely land at Clemson. I'm assuming that's based on the way the Tigers have recruited that defensive line position as of late. I get the hometown connection. We've talked about the Muschamp stuff before, but do you think that Clemson's a more formidable threat because they're recruiting that kind of defensive lineman for this 2020 class and have been bringing in those pass rushers for the last few cycles, and really at an unprecedented rate?
Yeah, let's go inside the mind of a 17, 18-year-old kid right now. Here's what I think is going to happen. I think by midseason, South Carolina would be lucky to be 3-4. Would you call that a very hopeful prediction for Garnet?
Probably the toughest schedule, with apologies to Texas A&M, who plays a tough one, and Auburn's not an easy schedule. South Carolina probably plays the toughest schedule in the country.
Yeah, the Cockabooses, I think they get Georgia, Clemson, and Alabama in the same schedule, along with their intra-division rival, permanent rival, Texas A&M. Everybody was remarking about Texas A&M's schedule at SEC Media Days yesterday. Well, that's nothing compared to what I think South Carolina is going to go through. You keep thinking about these things, and I think eventually there might be a closing kick scenario here where Jordan Birch, who cannot enroll early, he will not be an early enrollee wherever he goes. He might look at Georgia, he might look at Clemson, he might look at South Carolina. Okay, and not a lot of folks, especially young kids like these recruits, they don't know how good Jalen Carter is. But Jordan Birch can look at the Georgia board and the list of their commitments, and he can feel like he's going to be the best defensive line commitment coming in to the University of Georgia. Now, I know they talk about playing him as an outside linebacker where Mikhail Sherman's at, but then if he made that same look, that same glance at Clemson's board, Brian Brzee, Trey Williams, Cap Hart, DeMonte Cap, there's a lot of guys where if everybody wants to feel prioritized and feel like the man, Jordan Birch is going to have a lot of boxes checked there for Georgia.
All right, let's go through the final 5 names in our top 10 top targets of the class of 2020. A little quickly here, how about name number 6 on that board? We get to Cedric Von Prawn, the offensive lineman out of New Orleans. And, Von Prawn's one of these guys that is maybe the only offensive lineman left on the board for Georgia after Andrew Rame chooses Oklahoma, but he's also a prominent name, as the video that I'm going to show you here demonstrates. How about the athleticism for the offensive lineman, showing his explosiveness, the same kind of explosiveness he uses off the snap. Look at that box jump there from Van Prawn. This is an incredible level of athleticism. That's a really good-looking box jump from a big guy.
It's called plyometrics back in the day. It's box jumping. He's able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. You hear Texas A&M a lot here lately. There's always Georgia. There's always Alabama, LSU. Cedric Von Prawn, expected to be on that, let's just go ahead and call it for the rest of the show, that top targets or 5-star roundup coming up next week at the University of Georgia.
How about name number 7 on the list, top targets of the class of 2020, here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. We get to the tight end Theo Johnson out of Canada, and as we kind of touched on last week, interesting to see Johnson vaulting ahead of Darnell Washington after Washington had gotten a lot of chatter at a position like this in previous top targets list. It's Theo Johnson. I'm assuming a lot of this based on when he showed off at the opening, who now gets the edge in comparison to Washington, at least on your list.
Yeah, I mean, this is really like splitting hairs between Gilbert, Washington, and Johnson. To me, I think that's the clearly best 3 tight ends Georgia has left to look at when they can sign 2 this cycle. I just think Theo has a little bit more upside, a little bit more raw speed. I think he's going to eventually end up with a 43-inch vertical and running a 4.5 at least at 6'6", 245 pounds. The Bulldogs don't have guys like that. And this is a young man out of Ontario, Windsor, Ontario, that if he can get past that lure of hometown nearby, only about an hour drive, Michigan, his 4.5
a program that's used tight ends a lot more effectively than Georgia has. Honesty compels me to admit.
Honesty compels you to admit. You'd be a great recruiter with your honesty, true serum recruiter, Brandon. But Iowa, it's Georgia, it's Penn State, it's Michigan. Those are the final 4 for Theo Johnson, and he doesn't know what he's going to do at this time.
All right, next name on our top targets of the class of 2020. Is it another tight end? It is indeed. He's listed as an athlete. We'll call him a tight end. Darnell Washington out of Las Vegas. Darnell had some news recently, putting out on social media that what was originally a top 12 for him is about to be cut in half. He's about to release a top 6 here coming up pretty soon. Do you think that Georgia remains in that top 6 for Darnell Washington? I'm assuming you think they do.
Sometimes, Brandon, puts in these code phrases about quick and let's move through these very quickly, I'm going to say yes.
All right. Something else that Washington
Miami, Tennessee, Alabama, that's kind of what I feel like. Georgia, I feel like 4 or 5 of those names are pretty much it.
Something else that Washington showed off recently, or was shown off about him, was some pretty good athleticism. And you talk about splitting hairs between he and Gilbert. Gilbert's the fan favorite because he's from Marietta. But really, in a lot of ways, I've always felt this way. Washington's the West Coast version of what we like about Gilbert, an uncommonly good athlete for that tight end position.
Yeah, Gilbert even told me about Darnell, that he was impressed with the polish on his routes. A lot of people just thought Darnell was this 6'7", 260-pound freak of an athlete that would, maybe just run those stick routes and maybe the basic curls. But he had some polish to his game. And you look at that 51 feet power ball toss right there. That's like a new standard for tight ends at the opening at that testing throughout all those years.
Last time I tossed a power ball 51 feet was when I found out I didn't win the lottery. Just chuck that thing.
Man, that's pretty good. Is that original? You been working on that one?
Listen, I'm a professional.
Listen to Brandon. He's a little dog-eared from working so hard, double duty at Hoover.
Not at all. No, listen.
And he's cracking out the jokes as well.
Not whatsoever. Now, no joke here. The remaining names in our top targets list after Darnell Washington. Let's see how that top 10 finishes off. Another running back makes the list. He debuted here last week. It's nice to see the hometown guy, or at least home state guy, out of Callaway and Hogansville, Tank Bigsby, making that list. And you've clearly drawn your line in the sand. At this point in time, I'm kind of off the Zachary Evans talk, at least for a little while, until I see some more evidence connecting him to Georgia. I'm kind of off that for a minute. But you clearly have taken a stand of Bigsby over a guy like Marshawn Lloyd right now, which I think is interesting.
Honesty compels you to admit, Brandon. I need your 5-second answer. I can give you anyone else to pair in the entire Georgia backfield for the 2020 class. Snap your fingers like Thanos, make it done. Which 2 backs do you want in 2020?
I'd probably want Milton and Evans, but I think Milton and Bigsby or Milton and Lloyd feels a little bit more realistic right now. Now, maybe something happens over the course of the next few days to change that, and that's fine. I'll be happy to update my opinion when it occurs. But as of right now, it seems like the Batman-Robin combination of a Bigsby Milton or a Milton Lloyd just feels a little bit more realistic right now than Zachary Evans.
The things to think about with Tank, he wants to make his decision before his senior year. That's been his honest for the longest time. Wait and watch and see whether he's in Columbia or Auburn or Georgia the final weekend when the dead period drops and then the dead period opens back up again.
That'll be interesting to see. How about the next name? Top targets for the class of 2020. We just showed you Tank Bigsby. Ooh, how about a new one here? This is interesting for a guy that also released a list of finalists not too long ago. We'll have more on that coming up later on the show. How about Arian Smith out of Mulberry, Florida? Boy, Georgia has really gone shopping for receivers in the state of Florida this cycle. Arian Smith, though, not a name we've talked about here on Dog Nation Daily. Why is his name coming up today?
Well, it was almost funny. Just when everyone thought maybe Georgia was through browsing the aisles, I guess, a little bit at the wide receiver position for 2020, you've heard some chatter pop up. And Arian Smith is a guy that can run a 10.31 in the 100. He's a 4-star wide receiver, 6'1".
He's a top 200 player in the country. Top
number 34 receiver, I think, folks. I don't know. We probably don't have video of Mr. Smith up yet, but you need to watch his huddle video of him hawking dudes, chasing folks down on broken plays where he's saving touchdowns and everything else like that. You will think someone hit the fast forward button on your viewer, player, or whatever. And with Arian Smith, I'm going to tell you, a little bit bigger, a little bit more polished, and just as fast or faster than Corey Wren.
Is this Andrew Rahm scholarship?
I think it's a matter of...
I know you don't like when I ask these questions, but inquiring minds want to know.
I think it's more a matter of wanting more speed, because how they threatened Alabama in years past was those speed guys. You can't find or recruit speed. It's also a matter of, not just Holloman, because I think the program was looking that Holloman might have the year on the recruiting trail to be prepared, to prepare the position for them to move elsewhere. But if you look at Georgia long-term receivers for the next 3 years, Jordan Pickens is going to be a guy, big, rangy target. Dominic Blaylock, an inside-outside guy that will create separation on anyone. I think those guys will be fixtures. You got to remember Kearis Jackson. So what are they missing? They're missing that burner, that guy that would just scare the defense out. And if you work the tight ends and the running backs and everything else Georgia will have in its offense, Carson Beck even told me the one thing he wished that he would see in this recruiting class a little bit more of was a lot more speed. He wants speed guys. And Mr. Smith, and another name you'll see shortly, is going to open up the door a little bit for maybe some more wide receiver recruiting for 2020.
All right, so let's talk about that by transitioning to the names that just miss out on being on this list. We showed you our top 10 targets, but how about the names that are still to be considered here? And Jeff, as we show you this on the screen, how about this? A much smaller list here this week, and can't help but notice right there at the top, an old friend, so to speak, a name that we used to talk about a lot, a LSU commit. But Jermaine Burton's name back on the list here. What gives with that?
Well, first of all, true disclosure. I know this man well enough to know that we would goose him this week if we showed him a shallow top targets list. That would immediately jump to your mind, especially with that name up top.
Oh, sure, yeah. If you show 45 names on the screen like you typically do, I might not even find Burton on there. But you leave it to 4 names. Those are all 4 names I'm quite familiar with.
So we're doing, instead of doing the Dewey Decimal System with some of our top targets this week, we wanted to show you that one first. And if we can flash that one up again, that's Jermaine Burton, longtime favorite of myself. I think he's the best ball in the air, ball skills receiver out there. Zykevious Walker, Jacoby Cowan, he's out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and Avante Williams. That would be the likely Richard LeCount III player parallel if RLC3 goes pro at the end of this season.
Tate Williams is an Oregon commit, am I making that up?
Avante Williams is an Oregon commitment. And that's maybe short attention span theater for your top targets list. Now we also constructed a second version, which is maybe the deeper dive.
No, here comes the rest of the list. Oh my God!
So see, we're like Pavlov's dog here right now. We're able to play the BA chords really well right here.
Saw Darnell Harris listed some finalists recently. That's interesting. Jay Hardy's got about 4 versions of a top 16. Good to see him still on here. Chad Lindbergh, I guess the only other offensive line maybe in consideration right now. Timothy Smith is that other really big defensive lineman. Seems like Chris Thompson, I know you wrote about him. He's coming on as of late.
And let's watch.
Why don't you talk about these guys? This is your list.
Let's watch Thompson, because I think if Chris Thompson, that's the big safety out of Texas who Jalen Kimber has been burning up his phone for a long time. That big thumping safety Georgia might think it needs. If he doesn't make a visit to Georgia during this weekend, where everybody's going to come, and sort of like the West End reveal last year, I think we'd be able to cross him off. You see other names like there, Dwight McLaughlin, Nudie, as he goes by on Twitter. I think you're seeing here, if you're clever and you're smart enough to figure this out on your own, you saw example A and example B. Well, if some of those guys don't end up choosing to commit to Georgia, I think other names that are on this list will populate the final.
So you think Georgia's back in it for Jermaine Burton? Can you give us a couple sentences as to why?
I just think Jermaine continues to show how good he is. There's the long-time appeal of once living in Georgia and moving around, and he's just a special talent. And what Georgia, it's kind of like we talked about earlier, they want to get them all. Mm-hmm. And if you want to get the best players in the class, somebody that can jump across a pool.
Yeah, there you go.
Like Jermaine Burton can.
That's an incredible move right there.
Brandon, have you replicated this during your summer pool season yet?
I've jumped into a few pools and have not jumped over one, have not jumped across one, but Jermaine Burton's certainly capable of that.
Burton always is still getting continued consistent contact from Georgia. And you were kind of being coy and asking it, is this so-and-so's scholarship? Well, it might be shifting. Instead of Georgia taking 5 offensive linemen, they take 4.
So it is.
Maybe instead of taking 2 inside linebackers, they take 1. And maybe they're just tweaking. Instead of 3 or 4 defensive backs, they just take 2 or 3. It is a very fluid process.
Kroger's got you covered for your upcoming summer road trips. I've just taken one, and listen, when you got young kids, you got to keep them happy and satisfied back in the back of the car. Toss a little candy back there. That'll help you do that. How about this great deal? 10 for $10 Swedish Fish or Sour Patch Kids. 2 for $3 Lifesaver gummies. How about 2 for $7 in the Hershey miniatures? I love those little packages of the Hershey miniatures. You get I don't like the dark chocolate. I don't really like the Mr. Good bar. I pretty much just like to eat out the Hershey's, like the regular ones. But that's still a pretty good collection.
Regular old school Hershey's.
I am. I'm a classic guy.
No crackle?
I like the crackles. I just don't like the dark chocolate ones. Those are the ones I really don't like.
Oh man, those are the ones. I'm opposite. I leave all those alone. I leave the regular old school Hershey's in the slow lane on the interstate. I leave those in the slow lane. Give me that other variety.
I'm kind of a classic guy when it comes to stuff like that. But the good news is all that great savings and all that great candy, you can get that right there at Kroger, and it'll keep your kids happy as you're rolling down the road wherever you're going. Speaking of rolling down the road, we're going to get down the road here on this edition of Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger as well, because I know you want to hear from one of the guys that just showed up prominently in our top targets list. I'm talking about 5-star running back Kendall Milton. Now, Jeff had a chance to talk to Milton. We showed you part 1 of that last week. Wanted to give you a chance to see the rest of that interview right now. And if you don't mind, Jeff, really quick, would you mind setting up some of what we're about to see?
So first question, I think out of the box, if I recall, is he's very family-oriented. His brother, very close. He had tattoos across his knees to tribute to the relationship to his brother. How can he be so certain he's going to move halfway across the country at least with his college decision?
Great stuff there. Hope you enjoy Kendall Milton as a part of Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger.
Seems very clear that your father has done a good job raising you, but all of these decisions will take you away from your family and away from your mother and father's watch. How comfortable are you with that? Time to flap your own wings and be a man?
Oh yeah, I'm 100% comfortable with it. You know, my family, my dad's side is originally from the South, so I have a lot of family throughout Louisiana, Alabama, and Florida. So if I go, somewhere in the South, or I have family in Columbus, Ohio as well. So if I go somewhere, on the other side of the country, I don't really have a problem because I don't feel like I'm just there alone. I still have those, connections and those people to fall back on if I ever, go through something.
You sped up your timeline. You had a plan and you changed your plan. You audibled in the middle of this. Does this feel right in the way it's supposed to be, or does it feel like just rushed because you wanted to get it out of the way?
No, it feels right to me because I want to be able to go into the season, just focus on 100% on the season, focus on my teammates, my brothers, and, chase that championship. And I don't want to have to think of where I'm going to school during the whole, season, or take my visits during the season. So I want to be able to spend as much time with my brothers so we can form that bond and get that connection and hopefully win a championship.
You commit on July the 29th.
Yes, sir.
Will that be a big party? What's going to be going on in Clovis that day?
Oh, yeah, I'm planning on having a commitment party. We're getting the details and everything right now, so we're going to, set that up.
What will Kendall Milton, the commitment to any of these schools look like? Will you take other visits? Will you only visit one school? What will that look like for you?
Oh, after I commit, I don't plan on visiting any other schools. I will be, solely focused on the one school that I plan on going to. So I don't see myself taking other visits throughout anything unless there's like a major coaching change or something.
If you had who's been fun with you this week? Has anybody leaned on you? I know you guys have group chats and everything like that, but has anybody just been like, they laid on you and tried to go hardcore press with you or anything this week?
Not really, I'm the two closest people here that I'm closest with will probably be Legend and Elias. And, those dudes already know, where my head's at, that, the process is coming to an end, but they, laid back on it. They let me know that it's, 100% my decision. And wherever I go, they're going to support me. So, it's good to have brothers like that, will support you for what's best for you.
Do you have any idea of how much the fan base I cover is eager, is chomping at the bit? I mean, your dad tweeted out that video of your brother with the laughing gas and and people look through that and they saw your brother has Georgia bands on and just Georgia bands on. Do you get a sense of how much, if it is Georgia, that the fans are really ready to have you?
Oh yeah, they've already made it clear. They DM me. I probably get 20-something DMs a day. They made it clear to me that they want me in the system in the RBU. So I 100% feel the love from the Georgia fans.
Has it been something that Kirby said or Dell said that just sticks with you about the commitment Georgia is trying to make to you, about prioritizing you? Is there something that they've said? I know you want to be a number one or a number two. What sticks out with you in the pitch from Georgia?
Coach Kirby Smart, I had the opportunity to sit down with him and have a little meeting with him. And like Coach McGee said, he let me know that the opportunity is there for the taking. And they said they could see me in the program the most and making the biggest impact. And also the second thing that stuck out to me was, Coach Kirby Smart, he played at Georgia, so all those people that he went to school with, he played with, he has those connections for after football and, the marketability. So I would say those are the two things that stood out to me the most.
What's been the most fun this week for you?
I would say the competition, because, me and Tank Bigsby, we went, I think it was about 4 or 5 reps together, face to face, going through the backs. It's straight competition. So I would say the competition, because that's how you get better, and we're having fun at it. So it's it's a win-win situation.
Can you see yourself sharing the backfield with that guy? You think Tank has all the skills? What do you see about him? How good is he?
Tank, he's a great player. I feel like, in a game, if I was to come out the game, Tank come in, like there would be no drop off. It'd be the same, production. So I feel like with Tank, he'd be somebody that I could play with, that I could, change the culture with.
Do you see yourself maybe in that potential pairing? You're more the hammer, he's more of the Quicksilver guy, or how does that fit?
Yeah. For me, I feel like me and Tank are similar players. We both have size, we both have the ability to make people miss and also deliver the power. So I feel like me and Tank, we're both versatile backs, and we can help a program out.
What do you want people to know about this? And is it hard? Is it stressful? Do you sleep at night? I mean,
I wouldn't say it's hard, because like I said before, I have a group with me, kind of I would say support group between Trayvon Jones, my dad, and my brother, and they took all the load off of me. They took the pressure, everybody coming at me all different angles. They made it easy for me through the process. So I would say that my family, my support group, they made it easy for me through the process.
If it would be Georgia, what would be the biggest single reason why? If you had to keep it within 5-6 words, what would those be?
I would say the relationships throughout the school, because everybody's connected, from the professors to the coaches to the training staff. Everybody's connected. So I say it's the relationships.
So I've noticed your tattoos on your knees. Mm-hmm. Can you explain the significance of what those mean to you?
I have my brother's keeper tattooed above my knees going across. And that just, my brother, he moved to Colorado, so right before that, I got that tattooed, basically meaning that, however far we are, across the country, we always will have that bond. We'll always, have each other's back, and distance can't break that.
You're about to be a man. You're about to move on. What do you owe your dad? What do you owe your mom? I don't know if I talked to you enough about your mom. What sort of role does your mom play in your life?
My mom, she's been that kind of person that's there for me. She doesn't want to talk about football with me, because she knows a lot of people talk about football with me. So she's that person that, when I'm tired of everything, when I'm, just tired of hearing football all the time, she's there for me. She helps me out. So, she's kind of like a guardian angel type of person.
When you're 40, how will you know that this decision you make in 29 days was a success? What does Kendall Milton want to be like at age 40?
Kendall Milton, I want to own multiple car dealerships throughout the country, and I know if that dream comes true, then the decision will be right.
You got to get a nickname, man. Tank's got a better nickname.
Oh man.
Has anybody ever given you a nickname that you like it, or you rolled with it a little bit?
Most people just call me K-Milt or something. It's been kind of simple. That's kind of it.
You have a simple diamond stud in one ear, and you have a cross and a hoop. Did you look like this at 8th grade? Have you always had those, or are these?
Oh no. It's kind of a Cali wave type of thing. A lot of Cali athletes, they have that cross, and that's it kind of symbolizes, like when we go like to a camp like this, people see this, they'll be like, oh, you from Cali, huh? So it's kind of it's a kind of a Cali wave.
You ended up taking 3 visits just 2 visits to Georgia, right?
Yes, sir.
What was the school you visited the most when you were recruiting?
School I visited the most? It's just those 4 schools that I visited twice.
You've only been to 2 schools. You've only been to those 4 schools 2 times.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Wow.
Unofficial.
Kendall Milton, appreciate your time. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So I really enjoyed that conversation with 5-star running back Kendall Milton. It's Brandon Adams here, back as a part of Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. As you can see, the chair next to me is now empty. Jeff Sintel is taking care of a little business. He'll be back with us in just a moment. He's on assignment, as they like to say. There are a couple things from what you heard from Milton that really stand out to me. None more significant, though, than the way in which Milton praises Tank Bigsby. Y'all, I know that it's been come to be expected as commonplace that Georgia recruits running backs in tandem. You think about Sonny Michel and Nick Chubb. You think about Todd Gurley and Keith Marshall before that. And Marshall was obviously a huge recruit, as many of you might remember. That's kind of been the thought process that Georgia brings these guys in tandem. But that is not what every running back wants to be a part of. Some running backs privately, they may say the right thing, but privately, and they want to make sure that they are going to get enough carries, and they want to make sure they're going to get enough attention, enough credit. They want to make sure the spotlight's going to be on them. I really get the impression that for Kendall Milton, he means what he says when he says, hey, I need a running back to help keep tread on my tire. As he accidentally said in that one video that got passed around the internet, carrying the ball in the SEC is not an easy thing to do, which may have been a Freudian slip or maybe a preview of what's to come for Kendall Milton. But when Jeff Sintel in the interview that we just saw and those words of praise for Tank Bigsby, it's a pretty interesting validation of a guy that a lot of Georgia fans have hoped to see more on the radar for the Dogs. But I think it also serves to confirm what we believe we know about Kendall Milton, that he's a team player of the highest order.
Here's what all smart running backs tell me. They know it's very fickle. I think that's a reason why Elijah Holyfield bolts early in the face of maybe pre-draft evaluation, is they know, let's count them up, folks. If they get 200 carries a year for their college career, 600 carries, you look in the NFL, you're going to get 200 carries, 300 carries a year. I think they realize.
Once you get much more than 300 carries in an NFL running back, your career is essentially done.
Yeah, I think these players know they have about 3,500 carries, especially at the level they want to play in. Even if you're Frank Gore or somebody that just keeps going on and going on and going on. So I think a lot of these guys realize, hey, help me do this. And with Kendall Milton, it was very interesting to see him at the opening when no one knows where he's going yet, but yet Kendall is starting to figure out, I want a guy to roll with me and to ride with me. And he was looking around the contenders and the finalists, and he was kind of picking out his ideal backfield that he would perhaps want to run with in college.
And of course, one of the guys that could be opening holes for Kendall Milton were he to come to Georgia, and another running back where that guy to also join him there at UGA as well, is Tate Ratledge. Ratledge could be on a path that could lead him to being a 5-star by the time his recruiting process is all said and done. And recently we had a chance to kind of dig deep and look at the film for Ratledge, not just with Jeff Sintel, but our buddy Mike Johnson, the former SEC All-American, who's got strong opinions about how the offensive line game should work, and he shared those as a part of Real Talk. I think you're going to hear from Mike on this, that Georgia's getting itself a good one when it comes to Ratledge. In fact, here's what he and Jeff Sintel had to say about all of that. Hope you enjoy it.
All right, guys, another edition of Real Talk, and we're talking about Georgia commitments right here. Let's take a look at the second highest rated guy in the class. That's Big Tate Ratledge out of Rome, Georgia, Darlington High School. Mike Johnson, you've chopped up this guy's film. You got a lot to say. Let's start looking about what Mr. Ratledge, near 5-star status already, what he could bring to the table for Georgia. Right away, Mike, you see him working as a left tackle here in Darlington. Small school football. This is his junior film. What jumps out at you?
Well, I think first of all, it's core strength. And, you can talk about a lot of different things when it comes to offensive linemen. You're going to talk about foot speed. You're going to talk about upper body strength. But he really seems to have great core strength. And what I mean by that is watch him roll his hips. It's not so much that you don't see the great foot speed, but you see the core strength where he's going to stay locked in and he's not going to let somebody shed him once he's able to get on top of them. And that's what's so great about this film right here. Watch, when he gets his hands on, he almost looks a little slow-footed in these videos, and the hand placement's not always great, but once he has that, the core strength really takes over, and he's able to really control the body of the defender and is able to kind of take them down a lot of times. I mean, those are just straight up mismatches on the film you're watching right now.
You see him, and it's kind of gets lost on folks. Sometimes you see a film and you go, okay, this is an athlete working here on the offensive line. It's not lost to those who read Dog Nation that you even saw it when you were going through his film. This young man's punting for his high school team, and here's what you like about this film as we keep jumping into it. Now, he looks good as a junior, but then senior year, this is spring heading into his senior year at the opening, and Mike, he has blossomed.
No, it's really incredible, and this is some of the best camp film that we've seen in quite some time. And when you talk about the ability, and listen, anybody who's been around high schoolers, specifically high school offensive linemen, one of the hardest things to get high school offensive linemen to understand is to keep the weight on the inside foot, to take away the inside pass move. There's just no inside rush to be had there. I mean, he's setting these guys absolutely down. His core strength has taken over. His upper body strength has obviously come a long way. I also want to point this out because we might see this on film here in a little bit. Watch how his heels stay on the ground here. That's one of the other things that's very difficult with high school offensive linemen, to get them to understand that your calf muscles are not as strong as your quads and as your hamstrings and as your glutes. A lot of high school offensive linemen want to stay on their toes because they feel like that gives them better extension. Even in his stance right here, you can tell he's working to keep that back heel on the ground, and that's why he's so good at taking away a lot of these inside pass rush moves. Is he can put that heel on the ground, he can react with his quads, with his hamstrings back to the inside, and not wait for that heel to hit the ground. It's impressive. I mean, you can tell that he's got a very, very good offensive line coach in high school, and he is just absolutely dominating this camp right now. This is his impressive film.
It's kind of like he has a force field on the pocket back there. And you know the things, Mike, we got to notice here is right tackle. He lines up a lot in these camps at right tackle. In this day and age, are guys still a right tackle guy, a left tackle guy, especially when you think about them on Saturdays and Sundays? What do you see here?
Well, I think that he's going to be a guy that can play multiple positions. I mean, I think he could kick inside to guard if he wanted to. Obviously, he's a very talented tackle. And I think the reason I even bring up guard is because of that core strength. You know, so many times on the inside, and I try to get people to understand when I talk about core strength, you see the slap moves and the swim moves and trying to get guys off balance. When you have core strength the way he does, it's not very easy to make moves on him. You can't just rip around. You're not going to knock his shoulders out of the way. You're not going to get him off balance because his core is so locked in. I think he's easily a right tackle. I think he can probably play left tackle in a pinch if you needed him to. But I think he would, if you look at it right here, he feels very, very comfortable on the right side, and his footwork's very, very good. I think he could plug in right away at right tackle.
I think he's got the right dose of nasty here, if you know what I mean.
Completely agree, yeah.
You look at him, and physical football comes really easy to these things.
Yeah, I mean, you love the extension, and you love, you love guys that are not afraid to mix it up, specifically on the camp circuit. Listen, there's no helmets, there's no pads. Hey, listen, I'm just here. I am what I am. But he obviously, has the ability to do that, and you love a little nasty attitude. Listen, these defensive linemen and these pass rushers, they're used to getting sacks and doing dances in the backfield, and really, they're the freakish athletes. But these offensive linemen aren't afraid to kind of put it out there and say, you know what, I'm pretty good too.
Let's spotlight this one right here. This is Myles Murphy, a top 15 player in this class going to Clemson, and this is great on great. What do you see out of this matchup here?
Well, I think first of all, you can see the quickness in the feet, and he's not trying to overset. A lot of times when you line up against a guy like Myles Murphy, you say, the speed rush is coming. I have to be able to get out in front of him. He's very, very comfortable in his set. He understands that he has the footwork to be able to get back, to the depth of that quarterback in the pocket and still protect him while also taking away the inside pass rush. And I agree with you. I mean, that's good on good right there, and in a couple of good battles they definitely had.
You see guys right there, Myles Murphy, elite ball get off, but when you see Tate Ratledge, right now trending 5-star status, a top 35, top 40 player. I look at this young man, and I think he's going to keep a lot of jerseys clean in Athens
I think so
for
too.
3 or 4 years. Real talk, keeping it real. Mike Johnson, I'm Jeff Sintel. Thanks for joining.
So last week, I got a text from our buddy Mike Johnson, who is a real student of the game of football. He had been at a football event and had seen Tate Ratledge in kind of a camp setting, and he said that he dominated in that camp setting. He was a very physical, brawling offensive lineman, and then he felt even more strongly that Georgia was getting itself a good offensive lineman in Ratledge. I don't think Mike would mind me sharing that information. He had a chance to see him in another camp setting and was really raving about what Ratledge brings to the table. So good news.
Here's good intel from Brandon. Good intel from Brandon from Mike Johnson. That's not just a ballet shorts and Nike cleats setting. That was a padded up camp, I believe, a high school camp where he saw, you got more of the tools of the trade there. I mean, when you get a guy like Tate, when you can get him a set of pads and you can have him maul folks and mash folks, I'm sure he's still lining up on the right side. That really is a more complete look at what type of football player he can be.
Kroger's biggest sale of the season on patio sets, grills, summer housewares, toys, sporting goods, so much more is going on right now. You can save up to 50%, so make sure you get to your local Kroger for a whole lot more on that. Big sales going on there. All right, let's do some online chatter here for a moment. I want to mention a name that came up in the show a little earlier. How about Arian Smith, the 4-star wide receiver from Florida? Off my radar completely before today's show, I'll admit that, despite the fact that he's got Georgia as one of his top 8 here. Maybe a guy that Georgia's now taking a longer look at. He says he wants to thank the schools that are recruiting him, but he's going to focus his attention on these 8. You see Florida State, you see Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia right there in the middle, along with LSU, Florida, and Oklahoma. This is an interesting development for me, Jeff. I know you gave some of this a little earlier in the show, but how strongly do you think that Georgia is considering Smith, who is at least giving Georgia about, 12.5% of his attention?
12.5%, I like that. Always analytical there, sir. you watch the film, folks, and I promise next week we'll have more on Arian Smith. We'll have the huddle videos and everything else. There are some plays he makes on this hawking guys down running where it makes you think, is he playing with children out here? And even though he's in Florida 3A high school football, it's the type of speed. He's an athlete. Some of his published reports on his interviews, he drops the word special a lot about Georgia. He's visited. He sees something special there about the University of Georgia. I don't think you can turn down speed like this if speed wants to come and join your program.
What does that mean for Corey Wren, who's supposed to be the fast receiver in the class as it stands right now?
You're going to love it, because when you have a hard time figuring out which one of the 10-3 guys in the Georgia potential recruiting class is actually faster, that's your Montgomery Burns recruiting domination right there when you start bringing it in. And
Maybe so.
Here's an asterisk and a caveat. He's also 6'1" and 170. Some recruiting scouts and analysts feel he could also flip over and play safety, be a defensive athlete as well. And maybe when you're looking for that best player available, BPA, that is going to be a term we're going to use before the Hedges a lot in November and December. Best player available, that's the one that might get that 23rd and 24th slot on the Georgia class for 2020.
Speaking of being able to see some video of some of these prospects, the 2021 quarterback Caleb Williams showed off some more video of himself here and doing some hard work, getting ready to go here, and a guy who's going to take center stage with his recruiting process really in just a few months once these 2020 guys cede the floor there. I imagine that Caleb Williams is a name we're going to talk about a lot on this program and on Dog Nation Daily a lot in the months ahead.
Yeah, now, let me know how you think, the voice and heartbeat and pulse of Dog Nation here. Carson Beck plus Caleb Williams. If that algebra costs you Gunnar Stockton in 2022, how do you feel about that?
You want me to be honest with you?
Please be honest with me.
Not very good.
So you want Carson Beck plus Caleb Williams plus Gunnar Stockton.
Yeah, I mean, if you want me to just be very honest, as it stands right now, that's a pretty thin quarterback room, for me.
Oh, no, I just mean signing those three in those 3 consecutive classes. That's what I mean.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but you would still need Gunnar Stockton in 2022, I think. I mean, listen, there's a lot to like about Caleb Williams. I think there's also some areas in which his game is still rounding into form, and frankly, there's a lot to like about Carson Beck, and yet there's some areas in which his game may be rounding into form. I feel really good about both those guys. I feel better about 3 quarterbacks, though.
Honesty compels him to admit, what's better than having 2 elite quarterback signees in 3 years is 3 elite quarterback signees in 3 years.
I think Georgia needs to be very careful with its quarterback situation post Jake Fromm. I think they need to throw a lot of bodies at that problem.
I think what it is simply sign the best guy you can. If you can sign the best guy you can, one of those guys every year, and let the practice field figure it all out after that.
I guess I don't want to get lost in a tangent on this. The list of quarterbacks that Georgia has missed out on is really, really getting longer. If you're going to add Gunnar Stockton to a list that already includes DJ Uyunglele and the kid that's going to Oklahoma from Bogart,
I don't think you
at
can
a certain point in time, the list of quarterbacks that have gotten away is starting to get a little long.
I don't think you can call DJ Uyunglele as a guy that's a miss. I mean, he put Georgia in his top 8, but come on, he put the local community school in his top 8 as well.
Yeah,
coming all the way from California, I don't think you can call that a miss. Now, you want to go Trevor, you want to go Deshaun Watson through the years of in-state quarterbacks where Georgia didn't end up reeling that guy in. Okay, I'll take that argument, but don't bring DJ in. And even Vandegrift's really good, but it seems to me like Georgia has made its decision with pecking order quarterbacks for the 2021 class. And to me, it seems like the pecking order starts with Caleb Williams.
All right, so that's interesting stuff. Let me transition now, though, to the fun part of the program, the kind of thing I always like to get stumped on. Many of you feel the same way. As Jeff shares his weekly six-pack and tries to get us with some trivia questions here, and I no doubt assume this is going to be another fun round of questions. So with that in mind, the floor is yours.
Last week, we were most unkind to Professor Adams over here.
I feel like I actually did better than you thought I would do.
We didn't give you any multiple choice, but your multiple choice has been restored.
Batted about 500.
You're allowed to go through your deductive reasoning. Before we start our engines on our six-pack, might you have a guess about what the topic is for this week?
I'm assuming, I'm going to take a wild guess, it's Georgia players attending SEC Media Days.
Ooh.
Those would have been good questions.
Question number 1. What was your favorite thing that Kirby Smart said at SEC Media Days?
This doesn't feel like a trivia question.
So this is pick your pleasure. The story about Brooks Koepka, Justin Thomas, the 0.5 strokes, and the aggregate of marginal gains. B, pressure is a reflection of ambition. When you are green, you grow. When you are ripe, you rot. We're always trying to stay green.
So I wasn't in the room for the Brooks Koepka, Justin Thomas. That sounds like something I would have really liked, though. I was in the room for the ripe and you rot, and you're green and you grow. I think I understand that one, so I'm going to go with that one, I think. The pressure is a privilege or whatever that thing is. Honestly, I get so tired of all that kind of stuff.
Well, it's not pressure is a privilege. It's the pressure is a reflection of ambition. That's what it is now.
I mean, I think that's true. I think that's absolutely true. I think saying that over and over again has no impact in the minds of players. I don't think they internalize that just because you keep saying it over and over again. But I think it has the byproduct of being true, which is not a bad thing.
Should I have included life has no remote control, or should I included this is another Kirbyism from the week, or you could have included the allude he had to what he picked up from Nick Saban's recruiting, which is sign the biggest, baddest dudes. I'm paraphrasing. You possibly can.
So I'm going to go green, grow, ripe, rot, although I don't completely understand the analogy.
Farmer Brandon says not so certain about that.
And I'm going to say when you're green, you grow. I'm going to go green, grow.
4H Brandon has his answer. What are yours? What is a YouTube question?
Maybe green grow is Kirby Smart's reference to, hey, I need more green if you want us to grow. In other words, keep sending in those checks, those donor checks. Maybe that was kind of a dog whistle out to the donor class.
I think the donor class is checking in strong of late.
JJ McMillan says C is a great saying. Joel Moody says C as well. So does Desmond Thornton as well. So the audience is going C. I forget which even choice that was, but it's C. They're saying C.
Your answer is what? Green you grow.
Yeah, I'm going to say that one.
Survey says?
Yeah, there you go.
When you're green, you grow. When you're ripe, you rot. We're always trying to stay green.
How'd you know I was going to say that?
I just know you. I've done a million of these shows with you. I know.
I don't like it that much, but it's okay.
Moving on to question.
As I said before, I don't completely understand it.
Moving on to question number 2.
John Ben said the banana one. All right, here we go.
Who's the biggest player emission?
This doesn't feel like a trivia question.
From the team from this year's SEC Media Days. What's the guy that you feel was, probably needed to be there?
I'm going to surprise you with my answer, but I feel very confident. I would have loved to have seen Eric Stokes there. DeAndre Swift, by player reputation, probably deserved to be there the most. Stokes, though, I had a chance to interview him back during the spring practice. I really enjoyed that discussion. I think he's a pretty sharp guy. I would have liked for Eric Stokes to have been there.
Can you imagine the Big Country, Big Cleveland interview where you can imagine getting Hot Rod Blankenship talking about, would he go out to the SEC Media Days podium in a helmet?
Yeah, maybe so. And listen, they would have all been great additions. I'm going to surprise you and say Eric Stokes was a guy I would have liked for him to have been there. But by reputation, DeAndre Swift. But you can't take 3 offensive players.
Well, you shouldn't be surprised that you're going to feel the buzzer sting on this one, sir. Let's go ahead and give him the buzzer.
Why would I get a buzzer for an opinion question?
Well, I just feel for Hot Rod Blankenship. It's the most popular player on the team. You've been in Sanford Stadium when the pregame introductions are shouted out.
This is an opinion.
Yeah, but that's the opinion of the question. Who do we feel was the most? This is the Dog Nation brand.
But you asked me who I felt. How can I get a question wrong that was asking for my opinion?
Tomato. Our tomato is ripe now and it's rotting on these questions.
Adrian Carver says he would like to have seen DeAndre Swift there. Shane Bentley says he's with me on that one. Eric Stokes is a good talker.
All those guys are good talkers, actually, very good talkers. And I think all four of them would have represented the 3 for Georgia at Media Days, and still not going to beat the top Media Day contingent ever for the University of Georgia, perhaps ever, but at least under Kirby Smart.
All right.
Moving on to number 3. Which position? Here's your trivia questions.
This is really good. Sort of.
Complainer.com.
Which
position has Kirby Smart brought along the most to represent Georgia at SEC?
Well, I'm surprised safety's on this list because he's brought JRE 2 years in a row. No running back this year. He's never brought a quarterback before until this year. This was his 4th Media Days. Chubb and Michelle both would have gone in 2017, I wonder?
That was a stacked year. They had Chubb and Michelle and Roquan Smith.
Okay. I'm gonna say offensive line because he had to have taken Brandon Cablano and Greg Pike in 2016 because those 2 guys talk to the media every single day. So I'm gonna go Pike, Cablano, Andrew Thomas, and assume there's another. Isaiah Wynn had to go at some point in time. I'm gonna say there's been at least 4 offensive linemen in 4 years. That's the number one.
I'm going to say, sir, you are wrong.
Oh, is that right?
Little preferences here, but we looked through the archives, and he's had 3 defensive backs. Dominic Sanders in 2016, J.R. Reed in 2018, and 2019.
Don't know how you'd count the same player twice, but
he brought a defensive back that year to media days. That's how I counted it.
So, are you telling me that Pike and Cablano didn't go in 2016?
Okay, year 1 was not Pike. It was Cablano.
Yeah.
It was Dominic Sanders, and it was also Jeb Blazevich.
Okay. Oh, Blazevich getting a chance to go. And then Isaiah Wynn did not go in 2017?
Isaiah Wynn. The guys that went in 2017, a very stacked group. No, Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, and Roquan Smith.
Okay, there you go. Well, good.
Those were good ones. You're going to have to give history.
That's a good question. That's a good question. I don't like counting the same guy twice, but that's a good question.
Next one. True or false?
So if you don't count J.R. Reed twice, I actually get the answer right.
Yeah, but you got to count him because he brought a defensive back that year. I didn't count J.R. Reed. I counted the position.
All right, here
Which
we go.
position has he brought?
All right, here we go.
Semantics, sir. True or false? Kirby Smart has brought more offensive players to SEC media days with him. Kind of gave you a little glimmer of that answer with our last discussion,
Yeah,
sir.
but I can't remember. They take 3 every year.
Looks like
They
Joe-
took 2 offensive guys this year. This is 4th time. That's an opportunity. I'm gonna say he's taking more defense.
Taking more defense. So you think the former defensive coordinator, the all SEC
But
safety,
you did say he took 2 offense in 2017.
Ooh, I see Joel Moody is 3 for 3 already. He's doing
I'm
well.
gonna switch my answer and say offense. I'm gonna say he took more offense because fans and media like offensive players. But I'm gonna say he's taking more offensive players.
So Brandon has
Offensive players.
Brandon continues to
Changing my answer.
show his work before the final buzzer sounds.
People are saying true. Was it a true-false question?
True or false?
Oh, I don't remember which one it was. Then I'm gonna say he's making more offensive than defense.
Yeah, that's the premise we're looking for here.
Yeah, more offensive than defense.
And to get a quick and easy resolution to question number 4.
Too late.
True. Current tally is now 7-5 in favor
right.
of the offensive
There
side.
you
of
go.
it.
Yeah,
Was I allowed to count J.R. Reed twice for this tally?
Honestly,
purpose?
if you did it the first time, you better do it the second time.
I did. Consistency is your thing.
All right.
Moving on to number 5. Number 5.
Dante Edie, by the way, says you're having fun making me look bad. We should reverse the roles. If we ever do reverse the roles and I ask Jeff questions, I'm gonna ask him actual objective trivia questions and have an objective answer.
Oh my gosh.
Not the subjective stuff.
Okay, which one of these zingers did not? This is
that's
Brandon's.
good.
This is Brandon's free
Yeah.
space. Which one of these zingers did not come out of Steve Spurrier's mouth at SEC Media Days on Tuesday? Side note: best part of SEC Media Days by far was Archie Manning, Steve Spurrier, and Herschel Walker telling stories. I will accept no other answers.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I would have paid money to enjoy that as like a dinner theater experience. All 3 of those guys were great. Herschel was obviously the best.
Okay, so which one of these did Spurrier do or not do? He claimed the AAF league title by default for
He
his
did do that,
Orlando
yeah.
Apollos.
By the way, unasked. He just sort of volunteered that on his own. It was kind of awkward, to be honest with you, but he did do that.
There was never any sort of standings or official championship game whatsoever. He just claimed
Yeah.
it. Like countries claim other territories.
That's right.
Regretted he didn't play at Neyland Stadium, but he also relished about coaching in it.
I'll admit I did laugh when he said that.
Got in a barb about the futility of fake field goals and fake extra punts.
Yeah, I didn't laugh at that one quite as much because that one hit a little closer to home.
That one hit right home. When he was a player, he said he was playing so early as a sophomore, he didn't need to worry at all about that transfer portal.
That was true as well. So, yeah, all of the above. He did do all those. And listen, I mean, I'll be the first to admit, while Spurrier is a longtime nemesis of Georgia, he is kind of an entertaining character, and I didn't mind being in the same room with him yesterday. He's in his own way. He's pretty funny.
Will you promise me you will answer this question accurately?
Yeah.
Jim Donnan is no longer the coach at Georgia. And instead of hiring Mark Richt, the Bulldogs hire Steve Spurrier. How do you sit with that if you have Dog Nation Daily back in 2001?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I mean, I think that for a lot of Georgia fans, it's the same thing as, hey, with Alabama being a nemesis right now, you want to be the one to take that down. We heard that from Herschel Walker yesterday as well. And so as much as hiring Spurrier would have been a coup for Georgia, I will admit in all honesty that I would have much rather seen Georgia hire a coach that could topple Spurrier as opposed to if you can't beat him, join him.
Wow.
I don't mind telling you that whatsoever. That's absolutely how I feel.
I'd look at that a little differently. I would just think that you're getting the best coach in the country to come take over your program and not.
He was also on fumes in 2001 as well. He was a shadow of his former self. Listen, he didn't quit on Florida as bad as he quit on South Carolina, but he wasn't going 100% at the end with the Gamecocks there either.
Are you not
with the Gators there either?
Are you forgetting those Washington Redskins years? Because Jeff, as a Cub reporter, covered Spurrier's first season in Washington. And let me tell you, folks, if I would have taken a picture of Steve Spurrier at some of those press conferences in the NFL, when I'm sitting here watching this man who he's basically scorched the earth of the SEC with his offense, and he was putting on a very good Ray Goff impersonation after some of those Georgia-Florida games. I could have made money selling those photos on eBay for $25 a pop.
Yeah, no, he basically went to the NFL because of his dissatisfaction with the way that Florida fans were, I think, treating him with Florida. I think this is less about curiosity about the NFL and more about a restlessness of why can't these people be satisfied with going to the Orange Bowl?
So the correct answer there was all of the above. Steve Spurrier was in fine form. And sometimes it makes you think when those guys show up, it really makes you think that, man, another personality like Les Miles or Steve Spurrier would make these things more entertaining. Brandon and I were talking pre-show about certain select SEC coaches. We could be in Costco shopping for a TV, and that guy would be right next to us, and we wouldn't even bother about, oh, that's the head coach of so-and-so.
Yeah, the SEC's never had more anonymous-looking dudes. Chad Morris, Joe Moorhead, Matt Luke. You know, these are guys that are just, you know, anonymous-looking dudes. They've never had more in this league at one time than they do now.
Who's that coach that looks like he's from the Christmas Vacation movies with the RV?
Oh yeah.
Who's that coach?
That'd be Cousin Eddie down in Gainesville. That's certainly not one you're going to forget very easily.
Last question.
Please.
This is another subjective one, but so well.
All right.
Which one of these Bulldogs would be the way too early Dog Nation pick for representing Georgia at SEC Media Days in Atlanta in 2020? Which one of these guys do I feel is the one that folks need to know his name this year, and he will be a major part of the team, easily one of the top 5 players in my book in the 2020 season?
So these will all be rising juniors at that point in time. I'm expecting a big year from Azeez Ojulari. SEC Media Days, I'm not sure about that. You know, Mays and Salyer, I don't expect them to be starters on this year's team, but certainly in the case of Salyer, for sure, he's a good spokesman. Webb, I don't know about so much. Zamir White, I think, is going to have a breakout year, but Zamir hates talking to reporters, so I can't see him being too comfortable as a rising sophomore going into rising redshirt sophomore going into SEC Media Days. So I guess, for lack of a better answer, I'll say Jamari Salyer.
Jamari Salyer. First of all, I'll give you a tidbit. I would say Zamir White, if he does what everyone expects him to do in the SEC, he is going to spend 3 years in the SEC and then move on to Sunday's league. My answer, though, is steeped in a guy I've been covering him for a long time, and he, I think, will be a major contributor on this year's team. He closed with a lot of momentum in the 2018 season. I think he's going to be a future team captain in Athens. I believe that strongly in his ability and the way he goes about his business. My answer here, the answer we will record for posterity in this week's Six Packs, would be Azeez Ojulari.
All right, there you go. Obviously, a lot of excitement about how Ojulari fits into that, and we'll see where that all plays out for him this year. Fun stuff with the Kroger Six Pack here this week as we take a look at those trivia questions. What do you say we put 5 minutes on the clock and get ready to wrap up with our hurry up as we take as many questions and comments as we can over the course of the next 5 minutes and hope to give away a Kroger $50 Kroger. Yes, sir, Jeff. What would you like to say?
One more. Rewind that thing. Run that back turbo. Would you have liked to have put Jake Fromm's name in there as another repeated entry?
That would have been funny. Actually, that would have been pretty funny. Good stuff there. So let's do our 5 minute hurry up here, and we'll give away a $50 Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card. All right, over here on the YouTube side of things here for a moment, folks talking Braves baseball. Braves doing a day game in Milwaukee today. I guess I didn't actually even realize that. Benevolent Zeus over here on Facebook talking about some stuff over here. I love that name from him. People still recounting their scores from the earlier game here. The people still doing that. Robert Reynolds says, what's the percentage we see LSU in the SEC championship game? I've picked LSU to win the SEC West this year. That's my pick, but by the overall metrics, that's not going to be a 51% likelihood of happening, and yet I do have LSU doing that. I think they're the most underrated team in the country among the major national contenders, and I've made my case as to why.
Well, you believe in Joe Burrow there, but you also feel that Ty Davis and John Emery Jr. can do DeAndre Swift-like things in the SEC. The one part I don't like about your pick, but I do appreciate the ingenuity of it, is if LSU goes to the SEC championship game, you can bet Alabama, unless they have a complete dumpster fire of a season, is going to be in the Final Four.
It'd be a real concern for Georgia fans to have that happen again with them getting in there. Kathy Aquavia Green says, can she have our Mr. Good bars after I said I'm looking to toss those out of my Hershey Miniatures bag? Yeah, Kathy, you can absolutely have those. That's really good.
You learned today that Brandon treats Mr. Good bars like 3-star running backs or wide receivers from the state of Utah.
Also, a pretty good question here from Charles Kaiser, who says, who has a bigger impact, Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, Channing Tindall? Charles, I will tell you that I asked J.R. Reed about that yesterday, and what looked to me to be, after G-Day in the spring, a big role for Dean and Smith. J.R. said don't count out those guys a year older than that, though, and he mentioned Quay Walker by name. And I thought that was interesting. I mean, I think that he mentioned some other guys there as well, but Walker's a guy we don't talk about nearly as much. So to hear Reed mention Walker in the midst of some other linebackers as well, I kind of took something from that.
My pick there would still be Dean. I think he'll be a starter by
Well, it's not. No, I'm not saying Quay Walker's my pick. I'm saying it was interesting that J.R. Reed mentioned him by name.
Side note, do you think like Kirby gave a mandate to not talk about any of the freshmen to SEC Media Days? Because it certainly felt like that a little bit.
Maybe so. But it was still interesting to hear Reed mentioning a guy that we just don't talk that much about anymore.
It's so funny, man. It's really like Georgia recruiting now is like how I hope when my children get that age about daughters' boyfriends. Like, you like that guy and he's the quarterback of the football team, and then the next year he's the future lawyer, and then next year that guy is going to be a doctor, and then the next year after that the guy cures cancer. Georgia just keeps improving with a guy like Quay Walker and Channing Tindall. Remember how treasured those guys were when they were signing in the class of 2018, and now it just keeps getting replaced every year with more talent, where everybody kind of forgets about that potential 5-star that was signed way back in December of 2017.
Yeah, Kathy Aquavia Green also says, who gets canned first, Pruitt or Mullen? I'm a big believer that Jeremy Pruitt will still be coaching at Tennessee long after Florida has grown tired of Dan Mullen. I absolutely want that in the record.
Got a good staff. He recruits hard. Tennessee, I think he'll get Tennessee back to maybe not the glory Fulmer Neyland Stadium years, but I think Tennessee usually, it's like the NFL, I always say. The NFL is great when the Cowboys are good, the Bears are good, the Redskins are good, the Eagles are good. The SEC is great when Tennessee and Florida and Georgia are all great.
Jim Withrow says, is Jervon Dexter a flip candidate right now?
Yes.
That's interesting to hear. Brian Fortner says, any word on full clearance for DeJuan Mathis? I think we're a long way from full clearance when it comes to Mathis, but Kirby Smart did deliver some encouraging words yesterday on that front.
I think brain surgery, folks. I think everybody wants to make sure they run a 6-second 40 on the recovery and comeback and treatment and rehab here.
Buddy Lee Zachary says, can Jarvis Jones play a big role in helping us get pressure on the quarterback? He is going to be one of those student assistants. I'm assuming this is a pretty similar role to the one that Kevin Butler had for Georgia a couple of years ago. I don't know if this means that Jones is looking for a future in coaching. This is the way of him getting that started. But for a guy that was great at getting after quarterbacks, how would you assume he's going to go in terms of teaching other guys to get after quarterbacks?
To me, when I heard that story and when it blipped up that was happening, I thought of, he's not a graduate assistant coach. He's going to be the havoc coach. Because when you think about a linebacker at Georgia creating havoc, and not just on I've got a great little blitz scheme here. It's just eviscerating the man in front of them. That was Jarvis Jones. And the fact that Nolan Smith and Jermaine Johnson and Adam Anderson will learn from one of the most dominating defensive players in Georgia football history at the linebacker position, that's a caveat. Those boys are going to get better because they get to play around and learn from Jarvis Jones.
Austin asked in the Facebook comment section, how many wins does Georgia get this year? John Anthony says 15. I'll ask you, over or under, and 14 is not a choice, over under 14 wins for Georgia this season.
I just think it's so hard for folks to go undefeated this year in any culture of college football. Man, I'm surprised we haven't heard one of these picks yet, the season picks yet. I think the number's 14.
I told you that wasn't a choice.
I know.
Joel Moody says, by the way, earlier in our Facebook comment section, is flipping Justin Rogers from Kentucky still a likely or a possible option for Georgia?
The top targets list, sir, did that include Justin Rogers?
Well, that's not the only player Georgia's recruiting. Those aren't the only players Georgia's recruiting.
I mean, what about the also-rans on that third page?
So you don't think so?
I don't think Justin Rogers is an option, no.
Anything else over here? Tram Dog says, what position group's going to be the best for Georgia, the worst for Georgia? I won't say worst, but I will ask you, which position group do you think Georgia fans should be the most concerned about?
Concerned about? There's so many question marks on at the wide receiver spot. I think Kirby Smart even mentioned it at media days. Yeah, these guys are good and talented, but they're going to get checked. He said they're going to get matched up, and how can they get covered and how can they respond and get better? Because they're athletes that are going to be able to run with all these guys. Lawrence Cager, George Pickens, Dominic Blaylock, Micaiah Tongue. I thought it was very interesting when asked about Lawrence Cager. J.R. Reed basically said catch radius about as many times as he was allowed to on the podium. Very impressed with how that guy can go get balls and everything else like that. I think the one question no one talks about, and it's a sore spot for Georgia fans, of course, but no one brings up punter, no one brings up tight end. Those are areas where I don't think they have an all-SEC capable performer.
I'm going to make our $50 Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card winner Grady Hill today, who says, BA, how confident are you in the Dogs getting Kendall Milton? I don't do mock classes. I don't do crystal ball predictions. But if I were going to do one, I'd have Milton on his way to Georgia. That would be my pick there on that, Grady. I've been pretty clear about that as you know, when I've been asked about that in the past. This is one where the circumstantial evidence does seem to be moving in UGA's direction. So, Grady, I think that's a really good question. We will be in touch with you, and you can be a big winner today, in courtesy of our friends at Kroger. A final thought before we go here on what is our longest show in a while?
It's a good show. Actually, guys, he said it earlier. One of the highlights of this season, no matter what happens, whether it ends up in New Orleans with this man wearing a Mardi Gras mask and eating king cake because he's so happy about the way it turned out, one of the highlights for me for this season was getting the chance to listen to Spurrier, Manning, and Walker kind of play off each other. Walker. And it was almost like, I even shared this with Brandon, it's like, okay, depending on your religious affiliation, it was like Lucifer on one end, it was like Gabriel on the other, and in the middle maybe you had the middle ground, which was Archie Manning. And those three dynamic athletes, I mean, people brought up the story of the 540-yard game for Archie Manning and Ole Miss against Alabama.
Yeah, it was fun.
He told a funny story about his sons and how Peyton Manning was at LSU every weekend and never wound up going there. Can you imagine how big that sting was? Because Peyton just wanted to go to Baton Rouge and see a big-time college football game every weekend, and then how they're shopping around with Peyton and they go to Florida, and Florida's got Danny Werfel and another guy, and they're like, I'm not going there. It's just riveting, man.
Yeah, it was really good stuff. All right, so thanks for being here. Hopefully you found this edition of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger riveting as well. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Dog Nation Daily. More in the aftermath of Georgia's appearance at SEC Media Days. I know Jeff's got some great stuff planned coming up at dognation.com and the forum as well at forum.dognation.com. We'll also see you back here again next Wednesday at 3 p.m. for Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Y'all have a great day, everybody.